Well, this is kind of an advertisement. I'm hoping that this will reach a few more people than just a video. I guess people like personality, so I'm hoping catch a few people that like personality, judge that I have none or have some, and at least listen long enough for me to say, come, or a YouTube channel, RSHACE, and check out a video. It's a long video, it's about an hour and a half long. It has to give you a little history, and then it's got a little entertainment in the center, and then the important information is about the end of the second third, beginning of the last third of it. And when you see it, if you can take the time out of your busy life to send, grab a refreshment and let this video communicate its message to you. And then when you get to the point where the central message is for presidents of the United States saying the same thing as it's a script. And the script, a lot of conservatives who like Ronald Reagan but felt George Bush was not the same, will be shocked to find out that George Bush and Ronald Reagan were one and the same. The New World Order speech of George Bush is really just a rehash of the Ronald Reagan speech to the UN in the middle of Cold War negotiations with Gorbachev, where Reagan at one point said, you know, I've often daydreamed of what would humanity do if they were faced with a universal global threat, you know, from an alien outside universe. And, you know, people have, since then taken that to mean he's talking about aliens, but really he clearly goes on to say, well, really, and don't we really have an alien force on Earth already? And he said that alien force was war. So his dream was to see humanity to a universal global threat. A universal global threat that would cause humanity to take notice of their common interest and, to paraphrase, unite the universal global threat. The good mankind. So I'm kind of giving you a great hint already, and I think when you see it, you're going to be shocked, because the fact is we're being played by a group of individuals that are vastly superior to Nazis did. Russian people during the whole outside information. They were, up to that point in history, the thought control population on the planet. But it really looks like the United States took that baton and perfected it. You know, a little hint on transformation. You know, we're going to outline. You know, I talked to a young man the other day, and I was talking about OPEC, and how in this movie I explained how Reagan and Bush came into power, and their first act was to begin to organize a political, military, covert, overt reaction to the nations of OPEC. All you youngsters, you're like, well, who's OPEC? Well, that's the oil producing economic organization. I'm not sure. Oil producing, exporting. Yes, oil producing, exporting organization, OPEC. Cartel, I'm not sure what C stands for. So OPEC, OPEC stands for oil producing, exporting country. Yeah, that's right, OPEC. So you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, OPEC is a cartel. It's a group of members that are oil producers, like Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, Libya. Most Arab countries were members of OPEC, and in the 70s, because of America's support for Israel in the Six-Day War, where the Arabs thought that they had the attack planned down. By the way, those in the present should learn from the past, because you can predict the future by the past. And Israel was surrounded by all sides, and the Arabs felt like they had a coalition that wouldn't lose. And they attacked Israel, and the United States didn't get involved, but they did ship weapons and resupplied them. And the Israelis, in 6 days, defeated the Arab armies of 3 countries: Jordan, Syria, Egypt. So when that occurred, a couple of years went by, and the Arab OPEC countries got together and they said, we want to hurt America for this. What can we do? And they engineered an embargo. And that embargo cut off Arab oil to the American gas pump. What did that do? Well, in the mid to late 1970s, there were times when there was no gas at the gas station. It wasn't hot rate. It doubled in price. I think it went from 50 cents to $1, 50 cents to 75 cents, I forget, but a gallon. That happened, which was an economic hardship on people at the time. But also, your gas stations would run out of gas. So you'd have gas stations that would open and cars would line up for a mile because they wanted to get their portion of gas. And the gas station might put a sign out that says minimum I'm sorry, the maximum that you can buy is 10 gallons. So they limited how much gas you could put in so that they could ration the gas. So this happened, and it was a hellacious thing to the American people and the American economy. What followed was the interest rate hikes on the farmers. It was all late 70s, and it's really what started farm aid, because the farms started collapsing on the heels of this. So what's interesting, what the news has never talked about, what my research clearly found out and revealed, was that Bush and Reagan had a plan from day one. And their plan was to get rogue countries, leaders, cartels in line with the New World Order. Meaning you're not going to cause trouble in this world order. The preeminent military countries are going to make you pay. And they'll either do it overtly in your face, like we did Afghanistan, Iraq, or they'll do it covertly, and one person at a time, which is what we did to the OPEC nations. And when you watch this Operation Transformation film, I highlight the activities, but each one of these activities to each one of these countries had multiple levers and actions taking place. It is more than just what I describe on the video, but what I show is on the video. The attacks on these Arab countries one at a time. And for those that are neophytes in history, basically Iran, who we're trying to start a conflict with now over, I guess, their nuclear weapon program, which I'm not for. But in the 70s and up till 1979, they were our best buddies. The Iranians were our military partners, economic and political partners. And it's amazing that we can go so far to the other end of that spectrum. There weren't many countries that the United States gave items to that they gave to Iran. For example, the Federal Reserve gave Iran a printing press. I didn't know what they used. And, we didn't give that to Israel or England or anybody. We gave printing presses to Iran. So in 1979, when the young people of Iran stood up and resisted the oppression that was being meted and dealt out by the Shah, supported by that alphabet soup bunch of groups in America, they took our embassy. And for you neophytes who don't know what that means, that an embassy is a building that holds foreign diplomats within your country, and the agreements, the treaties for embassies are that that embassy is that foreign country's territory. So as the host country, to send your people or military into an embassy is an invasion into that country, that you might violate that treaty and do that. And this is what the Iranians did as students. They broke into the embassy and they took several embassy American workers as hostages, and us as kids. It's how Nightline was started, because every night it was after the news. It was day 21, the Iranian hostage crisis. What have they done today? What have they said? What has America done? And this went on from day 21 to day 31 to day 81 to day 101 to day 131. It went up to the day 444. And the bottom line is when we lost Iran and that started, the first thing we did is cut off all spare parts. You know, not only did they have a printing press, but 90% of their military weapons were American made. So any kind of modern high-tech weapon is going to require spare parts. I mean, how many of you guys can keep a laptop, you know, out of fries over a year? Tough for me. So when the spare parts were cut off, Iran had a problem flexing military muscle. And that was the point for us. And so that happened under Carter when that fell. At the same time, the Russians invaded Afghanistan, same year, in a lightning strike, which our military was shocked and called it a rapid deployment force, and demanded that the Congress and the President fund the United States Army and Air Force to be able to do the same thing, to generate a rapid deployment force, which would be a force of aircraft, ships, transport, whatever logistics, and to organize them in such a way that overnight we could put 100,000 troops in a country. It's what Russia did just about when they invaded Afghanistan. It shocked the world. So these both happened in '79. So Bush and Reagan, you know, pulled their October surprise, made their deals with Iran not to let the hostages go so they could win. So that Carter looked bad. That was successful. And on the day that Reagan steps off the plane, they let the hostages go. Iran did. And the scam was, oh, well, Reagan's such a cowboy, they weren't going to put up with it. They were going to take one day of risking him because he'll bomb the whole country. When really it was a deal made. It was an agreement. Release them when we show up, you get a better deal with America. And, you know, so it's very confusing when we're like in today's world where it's all or nothing with America and Iran and Israel concerning their weapons program. When at that time, Israel and America and Iran were making deals. I mean, Iran had our hostages, but you know, Bush and Reagan and their eventual CIA chief, a Wall Street lawyer, go over to France and make a deal with the Iranian president. Hey, don't let these hostages go. We want Carter to look bad, and if you'll keep them until we come into office, we'll take care of you, you know. And in the meantime, literally, this is before Bush and Reagan are in the government, still candidates. They're making these kind of deals, and Israel is shipping spare parts to Iran. The evidence is a C-130 crashed during this time period, and it was carrying F-14 tires against the embargo. And so those questions were never fully answered as to why they were doing that. But the story called the October Surprise, that was Reagan and Bush's collusion to prevent an October surprise, which would be Carter making a deal with Iran and the hostages being released, Carter getting an October bump from the public and eventually and potentially winning the election. So Reagan and Bush did not let that happen. So anyway, their first action, which I reveal in Operation Transformation, is to replace that, pardon the term, but to replace their bitch in the Middle East. Iran had been their go-to country to secure the Middle East and that Asia connection during the Cold War. Had there been war between the Soviet Union and America, Iran was our air base, naval base, oil spigot in that part of the world. So in '79, when Iran, kicked us out, as they did once they took the hostages, we left, and they kicked us out and prevented aircraft from overflying their territory to landing on their territory, refueling. It became an adversarial relationship. 79, 80, the election takes place. Reagan and Bush win and take over. At the beginning of 81, they win in 80, so in 81 they take the White House. Literally in February of 81, Bush, the old quote-unquote Texas oil man, Reagan sends him over to, lo and behold, Saudi Arabia. And they make some agreements, which were secret. We know this because of history, but there were some agreements made and some quid pro quo agreements made that has really, this 81 meeting has created the geopolitical structure of the Middle East today. I'd like to believe that what Bush offered Saudi Arabia when he went over there in 81 was for them to become the 51st state of America by default. And I think they are. They're like the furthest state in the United States. But he makes this deal, and as I explained in the movie Operation Transformation, the deal is obviously cut by saying we're going to do a lot of stuff in your country militarily. It's tough with your people. They don't like infidels running around, but look, it's going to be worth it to you, because what we're going to do is, number one, we're going to guarantee your continued reign as far as the eye can see. So you'll never have to worry about, like the Shah did across the water there, losing your power. We will guarantee and maintain your political control of Saudi Arabia, you royal family, you. And what we'd like to do also is build a modern air base in your country, because all you have is sand, and we can't land our bombers and reconnaissance aircraft on sand. So the first deal was to sweeten this under the rug, quiet, and annexing of a Middle Eastern country, Saudi Arabia, was to offer them the preeminent weapon system. United States, high technology. Other countries had sorry imitations of them, but nobody had the Russians didn't have them. We didn't give them to the British at the time. It was America had them, and that was an AWACS. And an AWACS was a 707 big airliner that had a giant dish on top of it, like a giant saucer. And what that was a command and control platform. I believe it could command and control 350 square miles, meaning everything in that area that was flying, driving, or floating on a body of water. This aircraft could see it, and by seeing it in grids, the aircraft was filled with multiple screens with operators at the screens controlling their own little grid section. And this grid section have, if a hostile entered into it, flying, driving, or floating, that operator could call in force on it, blow them up. So nobody had these at the time. They were ours. Massive force multiplier when you can see and control that big of a space. So our deal to Saudi Arabia was to sell them 4 of them and to back them with a couple of F-15 air superiority wings. So, they said they had to sell them to them, because the Saudi people would not put up with infidels being on their territory. But let's face it, we were flying the AWACS, we were flying the F-15s for several years. And at the end of the 1980s, we found out that Saudi Arabia was building massive military bases to Air Force, United States Air Force specifications for the whole decade, which we used in Desert Storm. So after that deal was pushed through Congress, and please believe the Jewish lobby fought it, and most of the American people fought it because told and taught to be pro-Israel, and everybody kind of had a question mark about, well, should we give these Arabs this kind of power? But people here didn't realize that we had basically annexed the country. Saudi Arabia is our 51st state. And after that deal was made, Bush secured an agreement to let American companies build that air base, which became Riyadh International Airport, which had the longest runways in the world at the time. I don't know why that was. Passenger jets don't need that kind of a runway, but really big, heavy bombers, they need that kind of runway. And big transport planes need those kind of runways. So that's kind of a hint. I don't want to go in and tell you much more, but 1981, a process of getting these OPEC countries. What I say is that Bush and Reagan were getting the dictators on the globe compliant to the one world order that was coming over the next 20 years. It was going to come, and it's going to be in fruition 20, 30 years, and nothing's going to stop it process. And when you hear the alien speech that Reagan gave the UN in the late 80s, talking about this, he wondered what would happen with this concept of a global threat against humanity, how we would respond to this by putting away our differences and seeing our common, and obviously organizing to fight the universal global threat in with to satisfy universal mankind, which are peace and prosperity and these kind of things. So, you know, that sounds pretty simple, but if it's so simple, you know, I don't know why they operate in their concealed kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but it's not explained. That outline's never been given to us, but it's been used as, to me, a psychological war implanted in our heads. It's a pre-programming, and you know, the one I really believe now that I mentioned in the beginning of this operation is the fact that, think about it, Ronald Reagan was a former actor. A lot has been said about that, but the president at the time was governor of California. I mean, he's more than Hollywood. He easily could represent the will of Hollywood to shape a nation. Now, we teamed up this actor slash governor slash president of the Actors Union individual from Hollywood was teamed up with a former CIA director. So we see the power of Hollywood with the covert potential of the CIA. And this is right on the heels of the Church Committee, a Senate investigation that was finally sat and opened in 1975, though it started to organize around the early 70s. Why? Because number one, an event that happened out of the Pentagon called the, where in 1970, a military attaché and his children copied millions of documents, top secret documents, about the activities of the United States and Vietnam and other countries, including Chile, assassinations that our intelligence services were, if not seen and pushing that. They discovered with the Pentagon Papers an operation called through our organization and you know, what happened in '69, everybody in America thought things were going well in the Vietnam War. And in 1969, we had Tet. Tet Offensive was basically the North Vietnamese attacking America on every front, from north to south. They even went into the, speaking of embassies, they went into the American embassy in South Vietnam. And it shocked everybody. The Tet Offensive did, that while we really aren't doing very well as what's been advertised. I mean, they're showing us bombing, everything, and shooting an artillery and aircraft carriers fighting, and really it was just a big meat grinder. We weren't doing very well. And so what they did after '69 is they went to Operation Phoenix, and that was a death squad process. And these Pentagon Papers, along with a lot of other things about Kennedy backing assassinations of other leaders, and, kind of creates your eyebrow rise. But it was such a volatile kind of information that the CIA director in 1973, Richard Helms, decided to get rid of MK Ultra documents, which were using a lot of Nazi, from Germany after World War II, scientists in Operation Paperclip, Nazi scientists people in the concentration camps were now working for their experiments on unwitting Americans, and some of those experiments you've heard about or you've heard whispers of, and that was like LSD. It was being given to college students, on these tests. And that LSD was being synthesized and produced out of Fort Detrick, Maryland, U.S. Army Weapons Lab, which just happened to be where the anthrax after 9/11 came from. This lab seems to be deeply involved in these kind of events. Anyway, to go forward, Richard Helms, CIA director, is terrified that this church committee that is being put together may gain access to the files of MK Ultra and MK Naomi, and he decides to hedge his bets, and he destroys all the documentation of these mind control, psychological warfare experiments and results and conclusions and the weaponized parts of them. He destroys it all in 73, leaves nothing, and then resigns. So on the heels of that, you have Nixon, who has done something in 68 that nobody has been told about, which was basically he did the same thing in 68 to get elected as Reagan and Bush did in 78. He sent Kissinger over to talk to the North Vietnamese to tell them not to make any deals with Johnson, President Johnson. Don't make any deals with this guy. We'll give you a better deal, and you not making a deal, we'll be able to get elected. Somebody came up with the figure that that happening and preventing a peace accord during Johnson's term, cost America about another 20,000 young men, in the rest of the war, another 20,000. There, that figure. I may not be right, that's my memory. So, Nixon had authorized that. That's what he was looking for. Watergate was evidence to this and other things like the Oswald deal, that the Dallas they didn't want, but mainly that's why they're running around with CIA agents and the Democratic National Committee looking at their documents when they get busted. That's Watergate. And, a president has to resign. So this church committee, when it finally sits, they're foaming at the mouth. They're like, we got death squads, we have mind control experiments, and directors of CIA are destroying them and then quitting. And now we have a sitting president that's having to quit due to these activities. They were pissed. They wanted to crawl up inside all the files of the FBI, COINTELPRO, illegal operations, CIA operations and experiments, and they wanted to show their authority and knock all these intelligence. Looked at the Mossad working in America, MI6 in America. Everybody was on the investigative committee's list. They're going to talk to them. So what's interesting about that, to make note, is that when Nixon went away and Ford took over, he was under this attack by these intelligence, yeah. What is it? Hold on. Okay, 9-4. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, over Gabriel's stuff. Yeah, I'll get to it. Bye. So the church committee is ready to make some people pay, and Ford is now this new president. And, you can imagine he's probably like a deer with headlights. So we asked to put together a team, a strong executive team that will protect this executive power, because let's face it, CIA, the FBI, these are executive extensions of executive branch powers. And so this was a wholesale attack on the executive branch and their power to influence and gain information in the nation and the world. So who does he put in charge to help protect the executive branch and these intelligence services? It's very interesting, very telling, ladies and gentlemen. The youngest White House Chief of Staff, Dick Cheney, the Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld, and for the most attacked and vulnerable of these organizations, the CIA, he put George Bush in charge. And these three were able to successfully deflect the oversight, responsibility, and power of the Senate, Congress, and the Church Committee by just refusing to answer certain questions, by putting them never responding, by basically acting outside the law, outside oversight, because, hey, we're the president, we got the power of the pistol. We control all of these forces in the United States. And so executive power is supreme. That is the country we have today. A supreme presidential executive power. And it's wrong. We have three branches because they're supposed to be equal. But the president, the executive branch, has been hijacked. And each succeeding president since then has encroached more and more on the power, responsibility, and oversight of the other branches, judicial and executive, and judicial and legislative. So, bottom line is that's interesting that these three fellows in '75 protected the CIA, insulated them from the revelations to the American people what they were doing, and to the result of that information being learned. These three guys, and it looks like 9/11, the CIA gave back. They paid their debt. So, and by the way, that was on the books. Believe it or not, it was on the books in the Reagan administration, 9/11. It just seems too obvious. When you see this program, you'll get the meaning that it was on the books then. I would just leave you with this. You're saying, oh, you're nuts. How in the hell 9/11? It was a high happenstance. There's no way that they were planning it as a conspiracy or Reagan did dream of a universal global threat. I'm not going to give it away, but he did say that, even to the United Nations. Called a bunch of aliens, but he talked to them. But let's look at it. 9/11. could it have happened if Reagan, could it have happened and then get away with it if Reagan and Bush had not fired all the air traffic controllers in the early 80s because they wanted more money? They fired them. They fired them. And they put their own people, they hired their own cronies and put in those spots, gave them federal jobs for years. And you're like, well, who would they hire? Well, are you aware that, you're probably not, so I'd say, when Bush was CIA director, George Bush Sr. CIA director, it was the end of that Nixon second term, and Jimmy Carter was elected. Jimmy Carter relieved him of his duties, as well as somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 CIA officers. Jimmy Carter fired them. I don't know how we could find this out, but I wonder how many of them became air traffic controllers in the 1980s for an operation that would run in 20 years. Yeah, I think I'm nuts. You listen to the video, you watch that, and then make your determination. You watch as 4 presidents give major speeches saying the exact same thing. And Hollywood chimes in too in their 1996 pre-programming death therapy of 9/11, the movie Independence Day. I'm done. That is the end of this live broadcast test. Want to check it out, see the new features, and it's pretty exciting, pretty cool stuff. So I picked up no viewers from the public. I wonder why. I know I have a few viewers, but these are viewers that believe in censorship. It's all right for them to see. Hey, for those that hear this, here's my next. I'm going to throw this out there so you can give me a response on the discussion page of the YouTube. What would you do if I told you that I'm a little bit beyond the average 9/11 truther because some of the things that I have to show people, nobody else is looking at or talking about. And it's so important to some of our alphabet soup buddies that when I run ads to try to promote these videos, I get service denial attacks from Santa Clara, California. And I looked, I said, well, what is in Santa Clara? I'm in Texas, I'm in Dallas, Texas. How could people in Santa Clara confuse for something in Santa Clara, California? So I did a little research. Found out there's an Air Force base over there, a retired Air Force base, I believe it's Moffett, that has been retrofitted and is being shared by 3 agencies, the Air National Guard, God bless them, NASA, and Google. And so if I try to run a Google Words ad on, say, some of this information, or on my frontline business, I'll just try to run ads on my business. For some reason, Santa Clara, California uses up all the credits. They hit the websites constantly. You know why? To prevent you from getting to those websites. So another interesting fact is that the images on one of my profiles that tries to promote this information, when you look at the images, there's more Defense Intelligence Agency pictures and employees popping up on that than my images. Now, I think that programmers and computer science majors and those kind of, and you can, I mean, it means that my website and their web links have connected several times, obviously. Since the DIA photos outnumbered mine from that profile on the images page. So I guess I'm leaving it with this, that you that stumble upon this, what do I have that is so important and significant enough for my broadcast to be blocked, for Google and NASA to attack my websites and prevent others to view it through denial of service attacks? What is it that I have that's so important? I'm saying what a lot of people are saying, that 9/11's a fraud, but you know what? I've got a unique perspective. All my information comes from 3 VCR tapes that were recorded on 9/11, recorded on that date. They're not tampered with, they have been sanitized. And what those tapes reveal on a high definition 50-inch screen TV that you could not see on a 2001 TV are some shocking facts and revelations. And that's for you to research. So for those who stumble on this, those are your questions. What the hell does this guy got in his possession? What is he talking about that is gaining that kind of attention? Not only have they done those things, they've affected my children, they've affected my grandchildren. They have waged a state terror campaign on my family, on me, for the last 5 years. And they are relentless. My daughter and son-in-law were pulled over one day when they were living on the other side of Texas and struggling with my little grandbabies. And I said, I had not a lot of money, but enough money coming to my possession from an inheritance that I called them and said, y'all get your asses back here, I need help. I want to make these 9/11 tapes while y'all run the company. And after living in this West Texas community for 3 months, running around with their kids in a van and the police seeing them all the time, never being bothered, on that day, they were pulled over 3 times on their way here. 3 different counties. And the last one found some marijuana. And the police officer felt that they both needed to go to jail for that. So CPS swooped in and grabbed the grandchildren. And they have not been out of their life since. That was in 2013. Because these criminal thugs will do anything to prevent you. They'll do anything. They'll do anything and everything to prevent you, the American people, the real power in this government, not judicial, not executive, not legislative. It's us. And what they tried to convince us is that they have the power. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're an American, new one or multi-generation one, you've got to understand we are the most powerful single force on the globe. We are more powerful than the Queen of England, the Pope, Russia and her military, the American people, 300 million people armed, educated, and if properly informed, are the most powerful juggernaut of power the planet has ever known. And we need to know that. We have to take our power back. We have to become responsible for how force is used in our name. And those among us that are harmed by these events, and when corporations who call themselves individuals sit and make massive profits for multiple years and pocket that money as people are unemployed, and the government has to basically pay 30 million people to stay on unemployment. You say, well, that's terrible. How would they pay people? You know why? Because they couldn't deal with 30 million people all waking up at once. That'd be the end of it. So they pay them. And during this time, all these big corporations that feel like they're running the planet through the FED and through Wall Street, and that they're untouchable, that they have all the wealth. You know, we have a gentleman's pack and understanding in this country that we promote wealth and we promote rising standards of living, but it's a pact of fairness. When the boys at the top stop being fair, they're going to like the boys at the bottom starting to play unfairly. You know, those corporations get things done because the U.S. Navy protects their products going overseas. What would they make if they had to pay for their own security? The corporations use train tracks on this country. What would they make if the Americans voted for a tax on using trains, a massive tax on using highways to counterbalance the wealth difference? You know, hey, boys at the top, you better realize that when the American people get informed, free day is going to be over. It's going to be payday. So I am overwhelming firepower. Signing off.